Hello everybody, welcome back to the Chunky Steel. This is Jordan. Today I have an important tropical update as we do have a couple systems active in the North Atlantic, which are Humberto and Imelda, and those could bring some impacts to Bermuda, especially Imelda. And we also have a few areas to watch in the Eastern Pacific, and we might have to watch a couple areas in the Western Pacific as well. And we'll also talk about recent impacts of tropical cyclones in the Western Pacific and the Northern Atlantic. So anyways, let's get straight into this weather forecast. First of all, looking at the Northern Atlantic Ocean, we do have two systems active. We have Major Hurricane Humberto and Tropical Storm Imelda. Looking at Imelda, for the forecast advisory right now it's at 65 miles an hour, wind goes up to 75 miles an hour. Expected to become a hurricane later tonight or early tomorrow before gradually strengthening, eventually reaching Category 2 strength with winds of 100 miles an hour, wind gusts of up to 120 miles an hour, and then after that it will become extratropical and start to gradually weaken before eventually dissipating in 5 or 6 days, and this could impact Bermuda. We'll talk about that in a minute. First of all, here are wind speed probabilities. You can see we have Humberto and Imelda overlapping, but generally Imelda will likely bring some tropical storm force winds to Bermuda, and it will likely bring tropical storm force winds and potentially even to the northern Bahamas for a little longer. Here is our 50-knot wind speeds. Bermuda will likely see some 50-knot wind speeds or 60-mile-an-hour wind speeds, although it's uncertain as of now. And then hurricane force winds. Bermuda could see some hurricane force winds. We will likely see these probabilities go up as we get a couple days of a future. Generally, the longer you go out, the lower the probabilities are for these winds. Looking at the forecast cone, right now it is still bringing some tropical storm force winds to a small section of the Bahamas. The next land that will impact is Bermuda, which already has a hurricane watch, and then after that will become extratropical, and then turn to the north before eventually dissipating. Here are our key messages. So it could bring some hurricane conditions to Bermuda, along with some storm surge, rip currents, and heavy rainfall. There will be some heavy rainfall and potentially tropical storm force winds in the Bahamas over the next several hours, and we could also see some rip currents and significant waves across portions of the East Coast over the next few days as well. Looking at Humberto, let's look at the forecast advisory. Right now it's 140 miles an hour, wind gusts up to 165 miles an hour, expected to gradually weaken over the next several days, or the next few days I should say, before eventually becoming extratropical, weakening to tropical storm force, and eventually dissipating, likely due to getting sheared and pulled into Imelda. Here's our wind speed probabilities for tropical storm force winds. Generally, this will bring tropical storm force winds to a large area, although this does not include Bermuda. Bermuda could still see some tropical storm force winds from this, but generally the main impact should come from Imelda. For our 50-knot wind speeds, you can really see that this will bring more 60-mile-an-hour winds, but generally we should stay away from land. And hurricane wind speeds, it should bring hurricane wind speeds over the next couple of days before eventually weakens and dissipates. Looking at the forecast cone, you can see right now is a major hurricane expected to weaken into a Category 2 hurricane on the morning or afternoon of Tuesday, before it eventually starts moving more to the east and dissipating on Thursday. And we also do have key messages for this. Looking at those, no longer a tropical storm watch for Bermuda, as we are no longer expecting tropical storm force winds for Bermuda, and there is now a hurricane watch for tropical storm Imelda, but we could still see some rip currents and storm surging portions of Bermuda along with the east coast, which could see some significant waves and some rip currents. And now looking at the satellite imagery, here's Humberto. You can see January appearing to be weakening. Looks like it's getting sheared some, and it'll likely start to become extratropical over the next few days. Here is Imelda. You can see it looks very good. It's in a good environment. We'll talk about that later in this video. But generally, this appears to be strengthening. Next, looking at the Eastern Pacific, we have a few areas to watch here. This is the main area we have to watch. It will likely form over the next couple of days. This does have a well-defined circulation, and there is some organized convection, and it'll likely form into something as soon as even later today. And if it doesn't form today, it will definitely form tomorrow. This is pretty well organized in satellite imagery, and I'll show that in a minute after we're done with this. Here's our second area to watch. This is another area of low pressure that's getting pulled towards Invest 98E, which is the 90% system. And this looks like it won't form before it gets there. And here's our other system. This will be from a low pressure system that will develop off the coast of Mexico later this week, and this could gradually develop into a tropical depression and tropical storm once it forms. 50% chance of development in the next 7 days. Here is Invest 98E. You can see really good convection, not the best, and you can see it does have a low level center that you can see everything's like spinning around in the low pressure, and you can see there's some convection over a center. I think that if this continues to organize, tonight we will see either a tropical depression or a storm form from this. Finally, looking at the Western Pacific Ocean, we still have Neogari, which is currently weakening. It should dissipate soon. We also have 93W and 90A, which are both low chances of formation. Here's the forecast for Neogari. Obviously, it's weakened some. Right now, it's probably around like 50 knots to 70 knots, or 60 miles an hour to 80 miles an hour, where we don't know because they haven't given any updates recently. Here's the satellite imagery. You can see right now a lot of convection. Appears extratropical or to be a remnant low there. We also have Bualoi, which did cause some significant impacts in Vietnam that we'll talk about in a little bit. You can see generally a broader low pressure still with some convection. Here's 93W, which is an Invest. Looking decent with some decent convection. Just not super organized as of now. And then here is 90A, which has somewhat high wind speeds, but it's currently over land, and once that moves away from land, it could form into something weak and brief. Looking at some recent impacts from storms, here's Tropical Storm Imelda. It did cause 2 deaths in the Bahamas, and it did bring some significant rainfall and damage. We do not know how much it did right now, but it did bring quite a bit of tropical storm force winds and heavy rain, which likely caused a lot of damage and injuries, and it did cause some fatalities as well, at least 2 of what I heard of. And Bualoi was actually significant. It caused 13 deaths in the Vietnam. 9 of those were from a tornado that hit Vietnam, which is rare, especially from a typhoon. And that did cause a lot of significant damage. I don't think I can show a video of that, but it did appear to be at least strong, not as violent, and it did cause quite a bit of significant damage. So this is going to be the longest part of the video. You don't have to watch this, but this is just some more detailed and technical stuff on the conditions. So here's the ocean temperatures in degrees Celsius. So you can see a lot of the Atlantic, especially in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, and the western tropical Atlantic is pretty warm, around 30 degrees Celsius in temperature, with some spots a little higher than that, and a lot of it's above 21 to 24 degrees. Generally from like the latitude of like, let's say like the mid-Atlantic down is generally favorable for tropical development, except just to the west of the coast of Africa, around like Morocco and Western Sahara. Look at the Eastern Pacific, generally good, to the west of Central America, and to the south of Hawaii, otherwise generally not super favorable for development. The Western Pacific is very warm, very favorable for development, just based on sea surface temperatures. The Indian Ocean, especially to the south and to the east of India, is generally warm. The southern Indian Ocean is starting to warm up, and the South Pacific is also getting warmer. Looking at the wind shear, here's the Atlantic. You can see Imelda is in a pretty good environment. The reason why Humberto is weakening, there's a lot of wind shear, not just from Imelda, but also generally environment, but Imelda is a part of it, and is generally getting sheared off. Look at the Eastern Pacific. You can see generally where we have a couple areas of interest. That's where we have the generally best environment. Otherwise, decent environment in some spots, especially to the southeast of Hawaii, to the west of Hawaii, generally unfavorable for development. Here's the Western Pacific. A large area from around the Philippines all the way to the south and to the southeast of Japan is quite favorable for development, except for a couple areas there. So if anything forms there, it could develop into something potentially big. Here's the Indian Ocean. Generally, some areas have 60 knots to 70 knots of wind shear, which is a ton. Generally unfavorable for development, except a tiny band from like northwest of Madagascar to the east, which is kind of close to the equator. But that's the one area where we would have to watch for something if anything didn't form. And in the southern Pacific, specifically the southeast Pacific, really nothing to watch for since we have a ton of wind shear. Here's the ocean heat content in the Atlantic. You can see mean development region has some, Western tropical Atlantic has some. Generally, the Western Caribbean has the most, with values of up to 150 to 175. Gulf of Mexico has quite a bit, and generally the Caribbean has quite a bit. You can see where the Bahamas are, there's quite a bit. That's why Imelda was able to strengthen, even though it was over land, since those are islands and there's a good environment there, and it's good environment for strengthening all the way until it gets out towards a little bit to the east of Bermuda. Here's the ocean heat content in the Pacific. Eastern Pacific, generally not good ocean heat content. But the Western Pacific has a lot with widespread values of 125 to 175, turning to the east of the Philippines and to the southeast. You can see where we had the systems move through generally cooler, and those have used up a lot of the ocean heat content in that area to the west of the Philippines and just to the south of Japan. So we don't have to really worry about a ton of land impacts unless it moves to the east towards the Philippines. Anyways, that's all I have for this weather forecast. We will have to watch Imelda as it moves to Bermuda and see if it actually brings the impacts it's supposed to bring. But if you're in Bermuda, I would prepare for hurricane force winds, storm surge of 3 to, let's say, 10 feet, and heavy rainfall that could cause some significant to catastrophic flooding. Just prepare for the worst and hope for the best there. If you're in the Eastern Pacific Ocean, really nothing to worry about. Western Pacific, Indian Ocean, nothing to worry about. Generally, it's just Imelda we have to worry about for Bermuda. In parts of the East Coast, we'll see some rip currents and higher waves than usual, so make sure you try to stay off those beaches and don't go in the ocean over the next few days. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel so that YouTube will push this video out to more people so that more people will stay informed. Also, share this video with friends and family, especially those in Bermuda and parts of the East Coast so they can stay updated. And also remember to leave a comment on what you think about this, and all of this will also tell me that you guys like the kind of videos they make and that I should do more in the future. Goodbye.